Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for being here. This is something that this committee, and particularly this subcommittee, is taking very, very seriously. Look, you know, my daddy used to tell me, when you don't do something, you're doing something. And if we don't do something, we're going to be doing something. So we got to address this, and we recognize that, but we want to do it right. I don't want to stifle innovation, and I don't want to stop the progress that we've made. The internet is phenomenal, but at the same time, we've got to address this, and we want to do it in a responsible way. But it's changed. It's changed since 230 was written. We all know that, and it's something that it's just, it's kind of a heavy lift, if you will, but certainly something that can be done. Dr. Franks, I'll start with you. Algorithms, they've evolved over the years and over the last decade, and they're used by the social media platforms, but sometimes I think they're used as an excuse, as a crutch, if you will. It always seems to be that we blame everything on the algorithms. But there was a Gallup poll this past February. It said the average teen spends 4 hours a day on the internet. 4 hours a day, unbelievable. And that's why, we take this so seriously, and we know that there have been studies that have shown that that the increase in the time spent on the internet has resulted in increased mental health issues. What's your opinion of algorithms and the algorithmic recommendations that the First Amendment? Do you consider the algorithm recommendations that the First Amendment is protected speech?
Thank you. I think that's a fairly complicated question, but I will say that the algorithmic, if we're keeping it at the category of algorithmic sorting generally, I think that that's a very large category that in some cases can be used for good as well as for ill. So the reason why I am being cautious here about saying algorithms are good or bad is, one, that they have such a vast array of uses and can be deployed in so many ways. I think we'd want to be very narrow, and we want to be very focused about the kinds of algorithms that we think are malicious. And I want to note that in that C2 provision, right, the Good Samaritan provision of Section 230 that talks about restricting access to harmful content, what we don't really think about sometimes, but I think is important to think about, is that companies are fully capable of using algorithms for good in that sense. That is, you could imagine the opposite situation of the bad situation we mostly hear about, that kind of terrible rabbit hole, that
right.
There's a teenager who wants to look for diets, and suddenly she's being fed all this information about eating disorders. What if we do the opposite, right? And some companies have tried to do this, to pick up on what a user's vulnerabilities are and move them away.
Well, very quickly, let me ask you, should the platforms be shielded from liability when they're using algorithms?
If they're using algorithms to restrict access to harmful content, which is something that these companies could do, I'd say that falls squarely within C2 and should not categorically be seen as a bad thing or something that is not deserving of protections.
Okay. Ms. Leary, go Dogs. I'm sorry that my colleague, Ms. Kamick's not here to hear that, but she's a Florida Gator, and then I got a Tennessee Volunteer up here. All of these people, they don't get it. But anyway, thank you for being here. Let me ask you, there are a lot of parents who rely on third-party apps to help them protect their children when they're using social media. In fact, we've got some legislation, some bipartisan legislation in this committee that we're working on that deals with that. But as you know, Section 230 requires the platforms to notify users of parental protections that are commercially available. That seems to be largely ignored. Why is that? And why don't we force them to do that?
Well, I'm hoping you will force them to do that. But why is that? Again, what's the incentive? The incentive is to take this highly vulnerable group, and I think they spend a lot more than 4 hours a day here, and to get as much content in front of them and keep them on as possible. And so to have really solid age verification, to really honor their privacy rights, that will cut into profits, because again, it's the monetizing. And I wanted to clarify something I said before. I didn't want to suggest there was a link to CSAM on the particular account. What I'm talking about is they want to traffic eyes to ads, right? So and that's what I mean when I say they monetize things. The ads, for whatever, are put on things that are popular, that they're trafficking folks
Of course.
to. I just wanted to clarify that.
That's business. We all understand that. Unfortunately, it has negative impact as well. Well, again, thank all of you for being here. This is extremely important. We want to get this right, but we got to do something. I feel very strongly about that, and I think my colleagues here feel the same way. So thank you, and I yield back.